Hi, everyone. Welcome. Wanted to thank you for taking some time out of the middle of your day to spend a little bit of time thinking about how we can all be a little bit more well as we are going through this unprecedented time in our country's history. I really felt called to do this workshop in terms of just wrestling with my own well-being and really wanting to use some of the resources that I found helpful to be able to help others that are in the same circumstance. So my name's Ellsworth. I'm an author, a coach, and speaker. I have a company by the name of Caped Coaching. I'm a board certified coach, a Gallup-Certified strengths coach. And if you are at all familiar with the Strengths Finder assessment, my top themes are connectedness, harmony, learner, responsibility, and context. And rest assured that you will see some of those come out throughout this time here. So a little bit about where we're going today, our aim for today. So I want to take a look at our current reality, illuminate almost 90 years of research on well-being. So taking a look at the wealth of information that's out there, it has been being gathered for a long period of time. And most of all, I want people to leave with an anchor in the storm, as I call it. So with a lot of chaos in our world, seemingly everything that we have taken for granted at this point in time has been upended. I really want to help people find that anchor that can kind of ground them so that as things are swirling all around us and we're going through these really challenging times, ultimately we do have those things that keep our feet on the ground and really allow us to push through and survive and thrive through all of this. So a little bit about me, in case you're wondering who this guy is. As I mentioned, I'm an author, coach, and speaker. You'll see a picture of my book cover to the right. I also currently serve as a program director for employer relations at Carleton College. I mentioned my coaching roles. And then at the bottom are a whole smattering of roles that I've held over time. So I've supervised volunteer groups for a nonprofit distance. I've worked in a variety of academic settings. I've been adjunct faculty in leadership at the University of Minnesota. So I've done a lot of things in my time, and I bring all of that in terms of the different perspectives that I bring to this. So I think this comic illustrates a little bit about how some of us that have suddenly gone remote in the last week or maybe 2 weeks, maybe longer than that, are really kind of feeling. And I think the first couple of days there were a lot of jokes and a lot of memes being produced, and I myself found a lot of kind of humor in the situation. And we were joking about how much teachers should be paid based on a day or two of homeschooling with my own children. But I think as reality began to sit in, we really started to feel the real gravity of our situation and, kind of a little bit of overwhelmingness in terms of everything that we're facing. So the fun little jokes about our coworkers and our lunch breaks and our uniform, and the fact that we're not really changing clothes that often and wearing the same thing, transitioning our pajamas from day pajamas to night pajamas and so forth, have kind of worn a little bit off. And so I hope that this is well timed in terms of helping you get well grounded again. So interestingly, Gallup, which does a lot of research all the time and for decades, has been studying, the state of the American workplace. And this data actually comes from a couple of years ago. So even 2 years ago, 43% of the US workforce was working offsite some or all the time. And so even though we've had this dramatic shift to remote work, obviously in a much larger scale and full-time than we've ever experienced before, um, it's not entirely a new phenomenon. And the really great thing about that is that there are some data and there are some experiences in terms of that remote experience that we can then extrapolate and look at in terms of understanding what we all are going to face as we make this huge transition for some period of time in our lives. So this data comes from Buffer, which is a kind of social media platform that helps people market to broad audiences. But they did a study of their users, and this is actually the 2020 report, so it's the 2019 data. But these are some of the challenges that their folks are facing. And I think as we look at this, we can really drill down into some of the things that we can expect to experience, and hopefully that normalizes it to some degree. So as we're thinking about our own experience, we're not alone. These aren't these isolated feelings that we have, but we really can connect with everybody's kind of going through this. So collaboration, communication, loneliness, certainly those social aspects, the challenge of not being able to unplug. So keeping that work-life balance when work and life are happening in the same place. Certainly distractions at home, and with many kids coming home now across the country, and doing homeschooling for some period of time, there's even more potential distractions, and so on and so forth. So I think what that shows us is that this relatively new phenomenon, although we've never experienced this scale before, there certainly are some lessons that we can draw from this. Now, of course, social distancing has been a term that very quickly shot to the top of our vernacular in our country. But I wanted to share this a little bit about social distancing that John Clifton, who's the global managing partner at Gallup, shared just a couple days ago. So John shared that Gallup's tracking social distancing daily in the United States and posted this to LinkedIn, that 79% are avoiding going to larger events, 75% are avoiding traveling by airplane, bus, subway, and train. 57% canceled or postponed their travel plans, and I know I was one of those. We had this really great spring break trip planned with the kiddos to go to DC and to hit up the Smithsonian and all the different museums out there. 54% are avoiding going to public places such as stores and restaurants. So more than half the country is taking that step. More than half the country stocked up on food, medical supplies, or cleaning supplies. Another 46% are avoiding small gatherings, such as family and friends. So really going to a pretty high level of that social distancing. So even as of a couple days ago, a lot of us are really closing those social circles and really, kind of figuring out this new way of going through life for at least, some period of time. One of the things that I think is on all of our minds, and certainly as we've seen the federal government acting to head off an economic recession, is whether or not there also will be a well-being recession of sorts. So obviously, economic well-being and overall well-being are closely tied. Our financial well-being directly impacts our ability to do well in life. So when you look at this graph, this probably is not entirely surprising that 2008, 2009, 2010, some of those really hard years of the last recession that we experienced were some of the lowest in recent history. And we've done nothing but, kind of grow and thrive in our well-being during that time. So with a, potential economic slowdown on the horizon, how can we take the steps necessary to really safeguard our well-being and to really get it into as secure a place as possible? So as I mentioned, this research has been going on for a really long period of time, and it actually goes all the way back to Dr. George Gallup, one of the two founders of Gallup, and his research on well-being in the 1930s. So we're coming up on 90, if not 100 years of research on well-being. In 1960, Dr. Gallup published the book, The Secrets of a Long Life. And then the Gallup organization really took on this global nature of well-being beginning in 2005. And they have representative samples from 150 countries around the world that represent 98% of the world's population. And that, of course, is still going on today. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the 5 dimensions that they have found through all of this research are really the pillars of what they call a life well lived. So when they look at all the things in all the countries and all the decades that really make a difference in people's lives, they've boiled it down to these 5 factors. So purpose sometimes has been called career well-being, but I'm going to use purpose since it's a little bit more inclusive term. Social well-being, financial well-being, community well-being, and physical well-being. And I'm going to spend time digging into each one of these 5 and talk about some different strategies to support those as we go through this really unprecedented experiment in remote working in our country. So the first, and the one that's really the foundation for the rest, is purpose well-being. Like I said, sometimes this has been called career well-being, but it's actually based on research of full-time and part-time workers, retirees, stay-at-home parents, everybody from every conceivable walk of life. And that's why I really like the term purpose, because it's not just about that paycheck and what you do for a living, but it's really, as it says, looking forward to doing something every day. So as you wake up, do you have that thing that you're looking forward to and really that kind of gets you out of bed, so to speak, in the morning? Are there things every day that fit your interests and your strengths? So things that you do well, are you able to apply your skills and your interests and your strengths? And then the last piece is that intentionality. So having intentionality and a plan to do those things. So it's not just by happenstance that you might do those things that you really enjoy, but it's really connecting strongly with those and making that plan to do them. So in terms of how you might do that at this point in time, what do you like most about what you do? So there's some reflection that goes into this. What do you need to produce your best work? So what are the settings, the conditions, the environments? What are those things that really lead you to produce your best work? And again, that's not necessarily paid work, but just what you do best, where your skills are, where your talents are. What's great about you? I know living here in Minnesota, we have this problem that we don't really like to talk about ourselves in a positive way. We have a really hard time bragging. And I always make a joke that I'm a native Nebraskan, and so I don't really have a hard time bragging at all. Coming from the great state that I do, it's really easy to talk about how great Nebraskans are and my home state is. But in what settings or tasks do you thrive? So really take that time to think about, what do you do well? What makes you great? What makes you exceptional? And then how can you structure your day and your week to do some of those things every day? So with intention, that intentionality. And then on top of that, how can you manage your energy? All of us go through life with things that are hard for us. There are things that, just are going to take some of our energy away that we just have to do and we don't enjoy them. But how can we manage those? Maybe sprinkle them throughout the day, maybe do them first thing in the morning when our energy is most fresh. But really kind of thinking about, how do we balance those things? So really what I'm trying to get at with this is that routine and structure are really the best parts of creating that purpose well-being. So having a real intentional plan and a routine for managing your energy. So if you're creating a workspace at home, you want to make sure that it's neither distracting nor dull. So that really nice balance. You might add a few plants because those have been shown to reduce stress. They also increase your ability to concentrate. In terms of getting into the rhythm of work, you might have a going to work playlist. So a lot of us, I know I have a 45-minute commute that turned into a 4.5-second commute. And I really enjoyed that time in the car in terms of setting myself up for the day. Well, now with a much shorter commute, how can I adapt that plan and really kind of get myself in the mindset? So think about the routine and the structure, maybe a playlist on your phone or whatever that can really set you up for the day. Or maybe even as you go into certain activities, if you're doing a lot of spreadsheet work and you really want to kind of get in the groove before you do that. We'll talk about eating well a little bit later, but snacking well, I think is a really good strategy for keeping yourself on track. So how can you really fuel your body and think about the things that you put into your body in that way, and then just think about ways that you might stimulate your body too throughout the day. So instead of traditional desk chair like I have here, you might think about an exercise ball, something that just some sensory toys that will give you some stimulation for people who really like kind of the tactile experience of things. And most importantly, I would just advocate, find a way to keep your work life separate from your home life. So if that's a separate part of the house that you only go to do work, it helps your brain really kind of get in tune with, this is the place where I do work. And you're not carrying that stress, that pressure, the just kind of wandering mind about different tasks into those different areas of your life. So the second dimension is the social dimension. And really when Gallup talks about the social well-being, it's really talking about how you invest in relationships that help you achieve, so get things done, how you enjoy life, so just that great companionship and doing fun things, and things that help you be healthy. So the really best social relationships are things that really bring out the best in you, encourage those positive habits. So those deliberate positive relationships, they encourage your development, your growth. There are people who accept you as you are for who you are. And of course, they treat you with respect. So those are kind of the foundations of social well-being. And just to put that in a little bit of context, if you can imagine for a moment, if you were to get $10,000 in cash in the mailbox in the next hour, how happy would that make you feel? So just think about if you were to suddenly get $10,000, no strings attached, how happy that would make you feel. According to Gallup's research, That would equate to about a 2% increase in your happiness. And now the reason I give you that $10,000 to kind of calibrate that 2% is that Gallup's research also shows that if you have a friend, a close friend in your life who is happy, there's about a 9 or 10% chance that you will be happy based on that friend's happiness, or a 9 or 10% increase in your happiness based on that friend's happiness. So when you think about how powerful $10,000 and how happy you would feel with that, that's 2%. And then you think about that 9 or 10% with just having somebody close in your life that it's also in a good mood. So you think about that really powerful um, kind of, no pun intended, but that contagiousness of that positive emotion. So how do you do this, especially when we're in this kind of really unique time in history? So first of all, recognize that this is just an extraordinary time, and friendships are going to look a little bit different. So thinking about how can you be creative and intentional and persistent more than anything with those friendships. So think about, how can you reach out to people, and going back to the previous slide. So who are the people that you can count on to help you be healthy? So I know a number of my friends have engaged in online, Zoom physical workouts. I have other friends that are getting together for virtual happy hours at the end of each day just to kind of hang out like they used to. So think about different strategies that you might use to kind of put those different pieces in play in terms of those friends that help you achieve. So getting things done, and that's not necessarily just work, but anything that you are trying to achieve. So if you've got a goal of maybe writing a book, maybe join a virtual book club, or if you want to, read some things, doing a book club with some folks about, reading those books. So just think about those goals that you have and those things that are important to you and those interests that you have, and think about ways that you can really be creative, be intentional, and be persistent. And then the last piece, which I haven't touched on, but that diversification of your friendship portfolio. So a lot of the economic talk is in terms of weathering economic storms. How do you really diversify that portfolio? Because that protects you the most against risk. Well, it's the same kind of thing with friendships, right? So we all have different periods of life where we go through struggles and we just kind of unplug a little bit from our friends because we're really stressed or just going through something. Sometimes we just get busy. So it's really difficult to count on one friend to kind of be everything. So think about how can you have many different friends that play different roles. So who's the friend that you go to when you want to do things that really help your physical health? Who's the friend that, really challenges, kind of your intellectual stimulation? Who are the different friends that you have that really deep emotional trust with and that you can really confide really deeply in? So think about how you can diversify that friendship portfolio and think about can I put these people around me that can support these different dimensions of who I am? So the third dimension, and this one's really hard to do in a short amount of time, but the physical well-being. And it really comes down to three things. It's eating well, moving, and sleeping. So when you think about the things that we put in our bodies on a daily basis, every bite is a choice. Gallup's research has shown that a single meal that's high in saturated fat reduces the artery's ability to carry blood to our bodies and our brains. So what that means is if you have one really, kind of heavy meal that's, high saturated fat, it actually affects your body's and your brain's ability to think critically and to really perform at the highest level. So a lot of times we think about how we eat as this long-term, decades-long kind of trajectory and culmination of choices, but there really is a daily component to it. And that the things that we put in our bodies in the morning certainly affect us throughout that day. Same thing with lunch and dinner. So just being really mindful of how we're eating, and especially during this time of quarantine, where a lot of us are spending more time at home, how can you make those really good dietary choices where you might not be as physically active as you have in the past? Which of course then leads me to the movement piece. So making sure that you have a plan to exercise regularly. I know for myself, I'd had a lot of fun working on a college campus, going swimming several times a week. That was my activity of choice. Of course, that's not really possible right now. So I've had to make my own adaptations in terms of how I'm getting that movement in. So looking for those options of things I can do in home, very low equipment, but also gets my heart rate up, builds my muscles, as I'm in my 40s now, I'm paying more attention to muscle mass retention and things like that. So making sure that you have a plan to move on a regular basis. And then, of course, sleep. So sleep is when our brains kind of take all of those memories that we have and all that information that we've gathered, and they process it into that long-term memory. Now, when one of my kids was really young, he slept really poorly, and my partner and I slept for about an hour and a half at a time for about 6 months. And we kind of joke that we don't have a lot of memories from those first 6 months of his life because our brains weren't operating at high capacity, and it was really hard for us to encode those memories. So the more that we can, kind of get that high quality sleep, and believe it or not, there actually is data that shows 7 to 8 hours is really the ideal amount. So really striving for that 7 or 8 hours is really important and helps our memories encode more efficiently. So I've talked a little bit about this along the way as I was explaining the different 3 dimensions, but eating well. So one of the great things about spending more time at home and maybe working remotely is that you have more time that you could step away during lunch to maybe prepare a meal in the middle of the day. So step away from your workspace and prepare a nice meal that's really balanced and has a lot of the deep colors in it. So the deep greens, the deep reds, the deep blues, those are all really good kind of signals for really healthy foods. The different antioxidants and things like that that you're going to want. In terms of move, so I've got a friend that posts a daily dance video of himself, and that's how he gets his movement in each and every day. Um, might look at fitness snacks. So throughout the day, instead of reaching for a little something to eat, you might pop away from your desk a little bit and do some squats or some wall sits, crunches, all those sorts of things that are really easy to do with no equipment. And then just think about how you might get fit with friends. So that virtual connection that I mentioned in the social dimension. And then last, sleep. So really practicing good sleep hygiene. Rather than go through a whole host of things, I put this link to the sleepfoundation.org website. There's a lot of really great tips in there in terms of improving your level of sleep. So things like really being mindful of the screen time right before bed, because that does stimulate your brain. It can make it more difficult to sleep. Having a really good routine. Our bodies really thrive on rhythm and routine. And so the more that you can set those routines and kind of go through those processes, it really trains the body to act and kind of know what to expect. So, yep, I've, laid down in bed and read for 15 minutes. I've had a little bit of water. My body knows that these are the signals for bedtime. So think about how you can really practice that sleep hygiene. So I saved this one nearly for last. There's one more dimension after this one, but I think this is one of the touchiest, and so I purposely wanted to hold off on it, and especially with everything that we're going through right now as a country and a world, and even on the individual and family levels. But to talk a little bit about financial well-being. So the bare minimum, the absolute necessary component of it is that we have to have enough money to meet our basic needs. So what that means is if you can't pay your bills, if you can't buy food, if you can't have a consistent shelter, obviously it's really difficult to do well in this area. So that's the bare minimum. That's the floor of where you want to start. After those things are met, the amount of money that you make is actually less important than just the security and stability of your finances. So what they found is that, it doesn't really, happiness isn't really impacted by the overall money and then the amount you make once you make enough to pay for your basic expenses. But just that ability to have stable finances and to kind of know what to expect month to month. In essence, what it does is it allows you to be able to be flexible then with your spending and make really um, conscious, intentional choices. So the major piece of the financial well-being, again, after your expenses are made, is how you manage and spend your money. So it's the security and the stability of your finances more than anything else. And I am by no means a financial guru. This is something that I've had to learn throughout my adult life. But I pulled this little link from mint.com, which is a website that I use in terms of tracking my own expenses. So I don't get paid or anything from Mint. I don't have any sort of financial relationship with them other than they help me manage my finances. But they produce this little FAQ sometime this week in terms of what you need to know to get through this financial time. and they have these 10 tips. So I've got the link down there, and you can just search that out, mint.com, search for coronavirus. It'll take you to their blog with these 10 tips. But one of the ones that really stood out to me and something that we've been practicing is really cutting wherever we could, just to give us more of that security and stability. So really, cutting, where all those different things that are not necessary, because what's most important is that our family is able to meet our expenses and, to have food on the table and things like that. So not taking any risks in terms of extra bells and whistles on our monthly budget. And as I want to bridge out of the financial well-being into the community well-being, I wanted to share this post, and I didn't ask for my friend's permission, so I didn't want to list his name on here, but he had posted this just a few days ago on Facebook, and I thought, what a great way of thinking about financial well-being, but also bridging that then to community well-being. So he said, in the next few days, if you go to the grocery store, go to the cashier first and purchase a gift card. While shopping, look around and be aware. Look for the person who's struggling, having to make those difficult choices with their finances. Find a store worker, give them the gift card, and have them just quietly give it to that person. Just realizing that there are a lot of people struggling right now with their day-to-day survival. And the more ways that we can positively impact that, the more it actually helps both our financial well-being and the community well-being. So the one thing I didn't talk about on the financial well-being page is that you actually can't buy financial well-being. So like I said, there's no amount of money that equates to having financial well-being. However, you can buy experiences. And what that means is we can always have those memories. They live on forever. And what better memory than going into a store and being able to really help somebody else? That's the kind of thing that you can carry with you, and there's no price tag that you can put on that. So it actually, buying those types of experiences, so to speak, positively impacts your financial well-being, and you can also help out the community as well. So the last of the 5 dimensions is the community well-being, and really the foundation here. So again, the floor, the basic bare necessities in terms of having some semblance of community well-being, is safety, clean air, clean water, and shelter. So once those are met, the higher level, kind of demands are able to be met. And those are really in terms of getting involved and giving back, and knowing that well-doing begets well-being. So once again, you have that clean, safe, secure community that you feel safe in, that accepts who you are as a person, so is accepting of you as a human being, having all the basic necessities taken care of. Those opportunities to really get involved and to give back are really the cornerstones of community well-being. So in terms of how we do that, kind of in this unique time period, look for the causes you care about, the communities that you belong to, and think about how you can give your time, your talents, your treasure to serve and uplift other people. And just to give a few ideas, I pulled these off of my Facebook page. These actually all come out of my neighborhood group. So I live in the Como Park neighborhood in St. Paul. One is actually a friend of mine that lives in Florida, and he, similar to what I posted with the other friend, in terms of reaching out to people in the grocery store who may be in need. But this friend is actually collecting a fund to purchase groceries for people in his community. In the Como Park neighborhood group, just below that, we have many nurses, but there's one nurse in particular that was looking for a mask in terms of being able to go to work. She said that she had heard that they were reusing masks, and if she could just put one of these homemade cloth masks on top of her N95 mask that protects from the virus, it keeps that primary mask, the more I guess industrial strength mask, safe, and keeps it clean, so that she can continue to reuse that one because of the shortage they're experiencing. But she can then throw out the cloth one because obviously, or wash it, because it's just a covering and it protects the other one from any sort of physical spills or whatever. And then the last piece, there on the side, the neighborhood window walk. So a lot of our neighbors have taken to putting up different things based on the themes of the day. So different things that they can put in the window. So especially homebound people who might be immune deficient, or people who might have been going through cancer treatments, or people who just can't go out for whatever reason. They get to put things up in their windows, know that the neighbors see them, and vice versa. So the neighbors, as they're going by, it's a way for them to also acknowledge those neighbors and to wave at them and take pictures. And it's really built a really nice sense of community in our neighborhood. So I know a question has come into the chat. I'm just going to kind of hit the last couple slides really quickly, and then yeah, I'd love to chat. So in terms of taking care of your own well-being, I think at this time it might feel a little bit selfish. And so knowing that that little proverb that you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can put someone else's on is a really good one. But there's data, and again, I pulled this from the Greater Good Center at Berkeley. And the link is down there at the bottom of the slide. But there's all sorts of evidence that taking care of ourselves first and our own well-being first really helps us in all these other areas. So these are just headings from the article. Our well-being is contagious in our social circles. So that's social well-being. Helps us bond with others. Again, that's social well-being. It can improve the health of those around us. So not just our health, it's not just about us feeling good, but it actually helps others' health around us. So that physical well-being and spreading that out to others. It also helps us engage in social problems and help the world. So there's evidence that shows that the more we take care of ourselves and our own well-being, the more we're able to make positive change in the world around us. The Greater Good also has some really great just overall resources in terms of well-being, and I would highly recommend checking those out. So I've got that link in there as well. So I'm going to pop into the chat. Thank you. Got a comment that someone loved the idea. Sorry I didn't get to that at the time. I'm not entirely sure what that was in reference to, but really appreciate that shout out. Really, like I said, I really wanted to share some ideas that I've seen and things that I'm trying to be intentional with in my own life. Just having this background with Gallup and kind of the relationship that I have with them as a strengths coach, I absolutely consume all of the information they're putting out in terms of well-being and employer engagement in the workplace. And certainly the Strengths Finder, anyone that knows me knows that I live and breathe strengths on a daily basis, and my partner and I talk about all the time. So the question that I kind of want to leave you with, so knowing, you don't have to have perfect well-being today, or even tomorrow, or even at the end of the week. But just thinking about what is one step that you can take today that can really make a positive difference for you. So if you think about those 5 areas of well-being, what's one area that maybe you've been struggling a little bit? And really focus on, on the scale of 1 to 10, how you take that from maybe a 3 to a 5, or maybe from a 5 to a 7. How do you make that little bit of difference in your life in that one area? And then once you do that, think about how can you start to spread that out throughout the other 5 dimensions. So really want to encourage you to think about what's one little thing that you can start today just to kind of get that ball rolling, get that positive momentum going, and really start to experience those positive benefits. So I appreciate you hanging with me, you kind of listening, learning a little bit about well-being. Like I said, I don't want to pretend I have all the answers, but I do want to share kind of this framework, because I think it's really helpful and it's backed in so much research that I know that it can make a difference in terms of how you live your life and how you really adapt to this really unique time in our history, knowing that we'll have to do these things differently, and they're going to look differently in our lives. But there is that kind of positive anchor we can put down to kind of keep us from flailing around in the storm. So I'm going to hang out for just a minute or two, see if anyone has any questions for me or anything that they want to talk about, but I certainly appreciate you hanging with me and listening.
Dad,
Yes.
can you hear me?